All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. Happy Monday, everybody. Hope all of you guys had an incredible weekend. We have a jam-packed day for the show. Later on today, we got a video coming out with our power rankings as well as a mailbag. We do power rankings every Monday, as you guys know. But for this video, we're going to be bringing on my friend Jovan Buha from The Athletic, who was with the Lakers in Las Vegas as they hoist the first ever NBA in-season tournament trophy. He's got a lot of information from boots on the ground that he's going to give us, and we have a lot of interesting basketball to dive into as well. And that's where I want to start, Jovan. So obviously there's a trophy waiting here, but there's another trophy coming in June. And what I liked about this in-season tournament was it was kind of like a miniature, less important version of the playoffs in the sense that the high stakes environment, the intensity, the good teams, like four of the consensus contenders to start the season, the Suns, the Lakers, the Bucks, and the Celtics were in this single elimination field. All of that kind of, showed us a little bit of like a playoff lens through everything so that we could kind of examine all of these teams a little bit. So my question for you is, what did we learn about the Lakers from winning the NBA's first in-season tournament?
I think we learned that this group can win a championship, and maybe learn is the wrong term there. I would go with confirmation that this group could win a championship, because I think you and I both had them in our inner circle of contenders entering the season. But with that up and down start, we've talked about it several times on here. I think, I don't want to say there was doubt, but I think there was a little concern with just, I want to see them win in high stakes environments. I want to see them beat good teams. I want to see dominant performances from LeBron and AD. And we got all of that in the knockout stage. And Austin Reaves returned to form. Anthony Davis had one of the best games of his career in that championship game. LeBron had one of the most efficient games of his career in that blowout against New Orleans. And then I think arguably the most impressive win of them all was the Phoenix one, considering that's a team that they most likely will have to face at some point in the Western Conference playoffs. And that's, all three games have gone into crunch time. All three games have gone really to single possession basketball, and Lakers have won all three of them. And I think their defense against Phoenix, like you've kind of seen the strengths of both of those teams, and LA has come out on top in all three matchups. So to me, I think, again, I was already high on the Lakers, and I think they've been playing better. They've won 12 of their last 16, if you include that championship game. But this, to me, was when the stakes are high and this team is playing for something, they can lock in. They have a level of focus, a level of engagement, a level of awareness that we hadn't seen necessarily consistently through the first 20 games or so. But with the money on the line, with the trophy on the line, they really stepped up. And of course, a lot of it was LeBron and AD. But I thought Austin Reaves looked really well. I thought the wings played amazing defense. Darvin Ham deserves a lot of credit for his schemes and his game plan. So to me, this was just confirmation that the Lakers are in that inner circle and might even be a little bit higher than we had initially expected.
Yeah, I love that. I love that part right there at the end, because that was my big takeaway. I had the Lakers coming into the season as my fourth best championship contender behind Denver, Boston, and Milwaukee. And I'm going to put them above Milwaukee now. I think that perimeter defense issue that Tyrese Halliburton just shined a gigantic spotlight on was just a great example of like a glaring flaw that they need to deal with. The emergence of Cam Reddish and Max Christie as like not just capable point of attack weapons, but like good point of attack weapons has put them in a situation where even within the context of the regular season, they're more well equipped for that specific problem, which really isn't even a problem now. Because now it's like when we talk about the Lakers point of attack defense, it's like you're getting Cam off the jump with Torian guarding your second best perimeter player, right? And then it's like, here comes Max and Vando, and Max is going to take that, or Jared can take that top end assignment, and Max is going to be an excellent option for the second best perimeter initiator in a bench group. And so like now the Lakers, I think we can say, are legitimately good at the point of attack, which is kind of like a bizarre situation to be in. Considering where we were to start this season. And so I kind of move the Lakers above the Bucks into that tier where, like, just in terms of sheer firepower, in kind of factoring in everything that all those teams can do on both ends of the floor, I still put Denver and Boston ahead of them. And as we're going to talk about later on in the show, I still think like this, the upgrade of that specific rotation position there, getting to like asking yourself the fundamental question, is Cam Reddish good enough to be the starting player on a team that can win a championship in a field this stacked with teams like Boston and Denver at the top? Those are other questions that the Lakers need to address, but I do think they've proven that they belong in this inner circle tier of contenders. And like specifically, it's the latest example of the simple basketball concept that has fueled Lakers optimism for 3 years, despite mediocre regular season results. And that is, in a real basketball game, when the shit's on the line, if LeBron and Anthony Davis are on the floor and they're playing hard, it is like a huge pain in the ass to deal with because of everything that they can do as athletes on both ends of the floor. And that Indiana Pacers game was such a great example of that because, like, you know, the Bucks had all sorts of bully ball options. They weren't able to inflict that on the Pacers. The Celtics had all sorts of size mismatches on the perimeter against various guys. They weren't able to inflict that. It was the Lakers that when the chips were down, were able to just pound the ball inside on the Pacers and just obliterate them on the offensive glass and make everything happen with their size. The other thing that I thought was clear from this tournament that stood out, and I wanted to hear your take on it. Big shock. This has been the case for this entire era, but defense is the identity of this team that they need to lean into. And so I had a take that I was bouncing off of Logan Swaim, our mutual friend, head of content here at The Volume, about this defense versus the 2020 defense. Now, hear me out, because the 2020 Laker defense was incredible. Certainly better at the center position in terms of what Dwight and JaVale brought to the table, and obviously better at the guard position defensively because of Caruso and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, two of the best guard defenders in the league. But that team did not have wing athleticism. Like Danny Green, I thought was slow that year. He was a good help defender, did a decent job in some lock and trail assignments, but he was not the best perimeter defensive option. Kyle Kuzma was more like a Rui Hachimura type, kind of like a top heavy, big forward that was good in help, good in rebounding, but not an excellent on-ball weapon. They didn't have guys like Cam Reddish, 6'8" freak athlete, Jared Vanderbilt, 6'9" freak athlete that they could put at the point of attack. And like, I think I'm still on the fence about it, so I want to hear your take. But I think that specific wing athleticism dynamic gives this Laker defense a like kind of a punch that it didn't have in 2020 in a different way. And so I actually think it's pretty close to that level. Would you agree, or do you still think there's a gap between the 2020 defense and this year?
I think at their peaks, they're close. I still think there's a consistency gap there where like that 2020 team was just dominant from the jump, and they had a clear identity. And, you know, I think part of it was LeBron and AD coming together for the first time. And, you know, several of those role players had either won championships or gotten close. And, that, you know, there was a focus there, I think from, I mean, what they had like a 20-3 start or something like that to the regular season. So I think for me, I totally agree with you. Like the wing defense is the big thing. And really like this is where Cam Reddish and Max Christie breaking out the way that they've broken out, it has been such an X factor for this team, because we were kind of penciling those guys in as like fringe rotation guys, and Cam's become a starter. Max has played some crucial minutes in fourth quarters. Like I thought it was really telling that Darvin went to him as often as he did in that fourth quarter against Indiana, you know, before ultimately closing with Cam, Austin, and D'Lo and as the three perimeter guys. But like, Darvin has shown he trusts Max, and those two guys taking the leaps that they've taken defensively, and just in terms of their point of attack defense, their screen navigation. I think Cam, you know, he's done the Jose Alvarado, you know, just he'll pretend like he's running back, and then all of a sudden he's like a cat and he springs and, you know, tips the ball or gets a steal. And like, it's just his ball pressure has been incredible. And that was, I think, a huge reason why the Lakers were able to limit Indiana to just 109 points in the championship game, was because Cam Reddish was able to hound Tyrese Haliburton in a way that Boston and Milwaukee just weren't able to do. So I would say the wing defense is better. I agree with you. I do think, though, the guard defense was better for the 2020 team. And obviously the interior defense, in my opinion, was better you still had AD playing at similar level. He might even be better now. I think it's close. You could probably make the case either way, but throwing in JaVale and Dwight, like that was a dominant, really, really dominant interior defense. And they had a game against Detroit where they had 20 blocks, and it was just like, you could not score on that team inside. And like, we've seen shades of that with, Jackson Hayes can block some shots from the weak side, and like Christian Wood has had some solid moments defensively, but for the most part, as we saw the Lakers kind of shift more to a playoff rotation, Jackson was barely playing and Christian Wood was out of the rotation altogether. And that was my initial fear heading into the season, was just when the games actually matter, I don't trust Jackson Hayes or Christian Wood in big moments. And I think Darvin has kind of confirmed that with phasing those guys out of the rotation for the most part. So I do think that at the point of attack, like they do have that perimeter defense with some of the wings, but I think some of the speedier guards, like De'Aaron Fox, is a really tough matchup for them, for example. And of course, he's a tough matchup for most of the league, but I think that 2020 team would match up better with him. And then we saw Jokic wasn't at the same level, obviously, but we saw how Dwight matched up with Jokic. We saw, AD and JaVale on the weak side and what they could kind of do with that strategy. So I think they were better at defending centers and they're better at defending point guards. Now, 2 through 4, I would probably lean this group. So it's going to be interesting to see how right now they're 7th in defense. Maybe they end up in the top 3, top 1. We'll see. But I think overall, peak wise, they're similar, but I would still give the edge to 2020 overall, as well as with their consistency.
That's about where I landed too, from the standpoint of like the consistency. I think this team can reach the same ceiling as the 2020 Lakers. I just think the length and athleticism is different on this team, on the wing in particular. But yeah, like that 2020 Laker team in a night in, night out way was just kicking everybody's ass. Now, that Kings matchup in particular is one I would love to see again, because the last time they played, they were still down a bunch of their wings. Sure, yeah. And the first time they played was right at the start of the season. And like, one of the things that's been really interesting with the Kings is they are 0-5 against New Orleans and Houston, 2 teams that have excellent, long, athletic point of attack defenders, and they held them below 100 points 3 of those 5 games. And so I'd love to see a Lakers-Kings rematch where it's actually Cam Reddish and Taurean Prince and then Max Christie and Jared Vanderbilt, where it's like 48 minutes of the Lakers ball pressure that we know they're capable of putting on them. But unfortunately, they're not going to see the Kings for a few months, so I guess we'll have to wait to see that one. The last note that I put on what I learned from this tournament before we move on really quick, it's just that Austin Reaves is a dependable third star in big games. And like, you and I were all over this throughout the season, this stupid narrative that started to form around teams are game planning more for Austin now. I'm like, he's in the exact same slot that he was last year during the postseason. Like, I literally didn't understand it. It's like, it made no sense the way he was discussed at the start of the year. He was so dependably great, even in crunch time when he was playing poorly. And he was just awesome in this tournament. 22 points per game, 28 in the closeout game, 17 against the Pelicans. Who cares? They got their butts kicked. Like, I thought it was a really impressive showing from Austin Reaves. It's just the latest example of like, they don't need another ball handler. They need, if they were to make some sort of upgrade, something at the point of attack. In the NBA, the game can change in an instant, but no matter how the action unfolds, DraftKings Sportsbook has your back. This week, new customers can score $150 instantly in bonus bets just for betting $5 on basketball. Win or lose, you get an instant dub. They even have great same-game parlays. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code HOOPS. That's HOOPS. New customers can get $150 instantly in bonus bets for betting just $5 on basketball, only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code HOOPS. The crown is yours. We have another guard for the Lakers that is going to be returning soon. Your colleague, Shams Charania, reported today that he's going to be returning probably in about a week. My question for you is, Gabe Vincent's return, how will it affect the rotation?
It's a great question. And I think it's something the Lakers are still figuring out right now. I think there's what I think should happen and what some people think should happen and what probably will happen. Because for me, I think there probably should be a trickle down effect where you potentially reconsider the starting lineup now that you have Gabe Vincent available? Because if you went back to the Austin D'Lo backcourt, there's obviously some problems with that. Didn't work earlier in the season, but you don't have a backup guard who can handle the ball right now. And I think bringing in Gabe, while he's not necessarily a traditional point guard or primary ball handler, he can give you some of that. He had given them some of that in the first few games off the bench. So I would like to see the Lakers revisit, and we've talked about it, potentially the Vando, Austin, D'Lo starting group. I think that group was so dominant in the regular season last season. I think they were effective in the playoffs until they ran into the Denver Nuggets. And I don't know if it's sustainable throughout the whole postseason, and you probably have to reevaluate some things. And of course, we'll see what they do at the trade deadline. But I would like to see them, potentially go back to that group just because, again, Austin remains their third best player. And I think by virtue of, while he's still closing games more often than not, by virtue of bringing him off the bench, there have been plenty of games where he's played fewer minutes than D'Lo just because of the way that Darvin likes to have the rotation and keeping the starters together for a certain amount of time. So even in certain games where Austin is closing over D'Lo, he's still playing fewer minutes just because of kind of the starter bench dynamic. So for me, I would like to see the Lakers go back to that. Now, what I think is going to happen is it's probably going to cost Max Christie his spot in the rotation, or at least reduced minutes, just because Gabe Vincent is the sixth highest paid player on this team. He was the primary offseason addition in terms of free agency. And I just don't see a way he's not playing 16 to 20 minutes, if not a little bit more, off the bench. But it puts the Lakers in a little bit of a bind here, because you kind of have the blueprint now of skill guard at the point with D'Lo or Austin, a bunch of wings, and then you have AD and LeBron as the centerpieces, either together or one of them's on the bench, and you're going with multiple wings. You put Gabe Vincent in there, now all of a sudden you have a lot more D'Lo and Gabe, Austin and Gabe, and it changes the dynamic. It changes the perimeter defense. Potentially, I think he regains his shooting, and that's something that helps. But and Gabe is a plus defender, but he's also 6'2", and that the difference between him at the point of attack versus Max Christie or Cam Reddish or Taurean Prince, like those guys are just bigger, and that's been the Lakers' identity over these last few weeks as they've had success. So for me, I think there is a trickle down effect of Max Christie probably plays either a lot less or at least a little less. Taurean Prince probably plays a little bit less. Those guys that are playing the two are probably going to play a little bit less just by virtue of more Gabe and Austin there. But I mean, I don't know what to do, because the Lakers haven't really needed Gabe Vincent, right? Like I think that they've had this identity now, and it's tough to tell a guy you're paying double-digit millions, like, we're not going to play you, or you're going to be a fringe guy. But I think he kind of has to earn that spot. So I'm interested to see how Darvin handles it, because unless there's an injury within the next week, which, knock on wood, I don't see how he just comes into the rotation and plays like 20 minutes without it really affecting their perimeter defense and some of these wings that we've been talking about having so much success recently.
Yeah, like Gabe can guard at the point of attack. He's a good ball pressure player, can get up underneath players. Got like a little bit, like 70% of that Dennis Schroeder type of vibe. But like Max is just a better perimeter defender than him. And if we look at the 10-man rotation they used, now obviously I say 10-man rotation loosely because some of these guys barely played, but it was basically D'Lo and Austin at the point, Cam as the starting two with Max as his sub, Taurean as the starting three with Vando as a sub, LeBron as the starting four with Rui as a sub, AD as the starting five with Jackson as a sub. So the simple answer here is Max is out of the rotation and Gabe takes a spot. Like that's what's most likely going to happen. And I don't think it'll have any sort of meaningful effect overall on the way the team is performing, just because Cam is still going to get significant rotation minutes. And I don't think it's going to make too much of a difference. But there's a simple question to be asked of, like, right now, out of that role, what do you like? Max actually has been an aggressive shooter. He's knocked down some big shots. He's had the ability to put the ball on the floor and attack and close out. So I think there's a little bit of a give and take there. To me, it just is a gigantic spotlight on the roster imbalances here. And what I mean by that is, like, ideally, like you'd want that same mold you referenced: skill guard, point of attack defender, taller point of attack defender, LeBron or Rui, AD or Jackson, right? Like essentially that was where the turning point of the season was. Now we disagreed about Austin being essentially the tool with which to make this happen, but the Lakers went from playing 2 skill guard lineups to 1 skill guard lineup, and the season turned around. The defense, in their last 15 games, they have the 3rd best defense in the league and the 2nd best record in the league. That's right around the time this change took place. It's been basically where things turned around for the Lakers. And so my thing would be, Rui Hachimura played 9 minutes in the Pacers game because he's basically viewed now as the guy who plays when LeBron's off the floor, and that's it. He played 21 minutes each in the Suns and Pelicans game, so he's not even playing half the games. And Rui's good. Rui's really good. And you just don't have room for him, especially in a big winner-take-all game like that Pacers game. He plays 9 minutes. So like that to me is like, when you look at this situation, you've got a surplus at a couple of key position groups. You've got 3 skill guards when you only need 2. And like really, you could imagine a bench lineup in the future that features Gabe at the 1 with Max and Vando, and a third. Like if you brought in an upgraded 2 for Cam Reddish, Cam would be a really good option there in that bench group, right? And so like the way I look at it, to me, this is just a gigantic indicator of the fact that this team has to make a consolidation trade at some point, because this is a team, like we said, that has a legitimate chance to win the championship, but is clearly a level below Boston and Denver, in my opinion. So how do you rectify that? By making a better use of your resources. And so in my opinion, like Gabe is like the perfect example of a guy that could take D'Lo's spot in the rotation. If you can imagine if D'Lo got traded and Austin became the starter and Gabe actually basically took over Austin's role on this team as the guy off the bench. And then if you were to bring in an upgraded version of Cam for that 2 spot, right, or somebody along those lines, then essentially now you're much more balanced, and you don't have a guy in D'Lo that you're not going to ever play in crunch time. And look, D'Lo, we've spoken very highly of him in his attitude and his professionalism this season, but once again, looked a little shaky in that Suns game. Looked a little shaky in that Pacers game. I know he was talking lots of shit to Bruce Brown, but I think he was like 5 for 16 from the field, so like, it's one of those things where like I think all signs are pointing in that direction. So I think that's the perfect segue into this. Do you think the success of the defense in the in-season tournament will have any impact on the team's strategy at the trade deadline?
I think marginally. Like I do. I think that we've talked about the need for potentially a 3-and-D upgrade and what that would look like, and who they'd have to give up and all that stuff. I think they're confident in Cam and Torian and Max and Vando of what those 4 can do on the wings when healthy. Of course, there's the offensive end where I think all 4 of those guys have some level of question marks in terms of their shooting. And Torian's been shooting the ball much better recently, and I think played better. But overall, just sort of like those 4, I don't know if you want ideally any one of the 4 starting on a championship team. Like I think they're all probably better suited coming off the bench. Although Vando, I think with his body of work, especially last season, like, you can make the case he's at least a good regular season sort of placeholder starter. But I think the other 3, you ideally probably want them coming off the bench with an ideal lineup. So I think it's going to come down to how they perform, honestly, like the next 4 to 6 weeks and what that looks like, because I don't think they're going to really change their strategy at the trade deadline, holding on to, well, we won the in-season tournament with these guys, so that means we're going to win in the playoffs. Like I think it's going to be, how do we build off of this? What does it look like now that we're fully healthy? We add Gabe in. How is he adjusting? Do we have the confidence? I think to your point, if you end up trading D'Lo plus something else, you can't go back to starting Austin at the 1. You can have Gabe as the backup, and then you plug that new player or players potentially into the starting lineup, and then somewhere off the bench, depending on what role they fill. But I think they're kind of in audition mode right now of how does Gabe fit off the bench? Can he help run the offense? Like, what does it look like if he's the primary ball handler and D'Lo and Austin are off the floor, and it's just maybe Gabe and LeBron with a bunch of wings and Jackson. So I think right now they're kind of in that evaluation mode of trying to see what this roster actually looks like now that they're fully healthy. A lot has changed. I think that's really the interesting thing too with the Gabe situation is like he's coming back to a completely different team. Like Cam's starting, Max is in the rotation, Vando's back. And it's just all of a sudden they have all this depth that they didn't have before. So to me, I think it's certainly a factor. I think it's certainly a positive for them that they now all of a sudden have this kind of wing competition of who's going to shoot the best, who's going to defend the best, who's going to be the best on the boards. That's another area where I think potentially benching Max, they lose that. Like to me, he's a better rebounder than Taurean Prince and Cam Reddish. Like that is one area I give Max the edge over those two guys. Despite I think overall them probably playing slightly better than him. I think his rebounding has been an underrated part of his game. So like you lose a little bit of that. That's been something that the Lakers have actually excelled in over the last few weeks, has been their defensive rebounding, no longer having some of those second chance points woes that they had earlier in the season. So I think there's a lot of questions right now. We're not really going to have an answer until we see what this group looks like fully healthy. But I think their recent success with these wings is a factor for them, but I don't think it's going to necessarily be, we're just satisfied with Cam and Vando and Taurean. I think they're still going to be aggressive trying to get that type of guy. But I think they do have a level of, if we stay put or at least look to fill a different role, we're confident that these guys can rise to a certain level and play well in big games as they just did in the in-season tournament.
Yeah, that to me is kind of where this gets into a complicated situation. It feels really weird talking about being aggressive at the deadline when I'm talking about a team that I genuinely believe is the third best championship contender right now. It feels like a misplaced kind of look to the future, right? But at the end of the day, I want to just put it this simply for Laker fans. If you end up in the Western Conference Finals against Denver, it's Jamal Murray, literally one of the top 20 players in the league. It's KCP, one of the best starting role player guards in the league. It's Michael Porter Jr., one of the best starting role player wings in the league. It's Aaron Gordon, one of the best starting power forward role players in the league. And Nikola Jokic, the best player in the league. If you play Boston, it's Derek White, a above average NBA starter, a damn good player. It's Drew Holiday, an above average, like literally a fringe star. It's Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. It's going to be Kristaps Porzingis. Like the point is like when you're talking about the top levels, now let me pretend the Lakers are going to start Cam Reddish. And Cam Reddish has been a feel-good story in a lot of ways, because this is a guy who like legitimately has been very good this regular season. He's been a very good point of attack defender. And like this is three NBA franchises wanted nothing to do with this guy. Like straight up wanted nothing to do with him. Let him go for nothing. And the Lakers have gotten real use and value out of him, revitalized his career. He will be on an NBA deal next year somewhere, and he's going to be a guy who's viewed as like a 3-and-D wing, or a D-and-3 wing, I should say. But like the reality is stack yourself against Denver and stack yourself against Boston and ask yourself if Cam and Taurean is going to be a legitimate weak point in a series like that. And the answer, in my opinion, is a pretty clear yes. Yep. You're going to be giving a significant advantage up in those situations at the highest levels. Again, to win 4 series, you're probably going to have to go through Denver. You're probably going to have to go through Boston or somebody who beat Boston or somebody who beat Denver. And so, again, like I look at it when you have that problem, and then an internal problem, which is Rui literally is this incredible player that you can't play because LeBron's on your team and he plays the same position. And so he barely plays. And D'Angelo Russell, a guy who you cannot play alongside your other skill guard, Austin Reaves, at least not often. They did it a little bit against Indy down the stretch. But like for the most part, he's a redundancy with a better version of him that's on the bench. And for the most part, he's going to be on the bench in big moments. And so like to me, it's just a simple question of resource management and trying to give yourself the best chance to win, especially when you got a 39-year-old LeBron James. But I'll get off my soapbox now. So before we get out of here, well, I guess we have 2 more things that I want to hit before we get out of here. Do you let's actually start with the legacy talk. So obviously We are not ESPN First Take here. We are not a debate show. But I am curious just to hear your personal experience as a basketball fan. What does winning this tournament and winning this tournament MVP mean for you in your fan experience watching LeBron James?
That's a good question. I don't want to get too hot takey with it, but I think it's just an incredible testament to how great he remains. And I said my biggest takeaway from Las Vegas was the confirmation that the Lakers are in the inner circle of title contenders. If not, I'm with you right now. I'd put them behind Denver and Boston at number 3. But the biggest reason for that is because when LeBron James wants to be the best player on the floor, he is the best player on the floor. And the fact that we're still saying that in year 21 at, he's less than 3 weeks away from being turning 39, like that's just insane. And the way that he just eviscerated the New Orleans Pelicans with an assassin-like efficiency of just, I'm going to put this game away. I'm going to hit 3 straight threes. I'm going to be playing to the crowd, getting the pro LA crowd into this as kind of turning it into a home court advantage. Like it's just, it's incredible. And I think LeBron has mastered the game to the point where like we've seen it, like he'll have, 16 points through the first 3 quarters, and then he'll have a big fourth quarter. And, sometimes I feel like his numbers don't always reflect the impact he had over the full 48 minutes or however many minutes he played. But like in a single elimination format, and we've seen it in crunch time too, like you put LeBron in a situation where he's like, I have 3 to 5 minutes to manipulate this game, extract all the juice offensively out of our sets and run the LeBron AD pick and roll and find mismatches. And hey, Austin's got it going. Give the ball to Austin. Or they're overplaying this. Like let's Cam Reddish, you cut here or you spot up here. Like he just knows how to manipulate the game offensively. And then I think defensively really has stepped up where earlier in the season, there were times where I felt he was a little lackadaisical defensively, to put it kindly. And with his box outs and his rotations and just his general defensive effort. But I thought he was great in the tournament. And a big part of the reason why the Lakers were able to stifle the Pacers the way that they did was not just Anthony Davis and his incredible defensive dominance and not just the point of attack defense with guys like Torian and Cam, but it was also LeBron playing that middle linebacker role and intercepting passes, deflecting passes, making really smart low man rotations. And like, there just aren't many guys who can do what he does on both ends of the floor when he's fully engaged. And we've seen now he can still get to that level when it really matters. So to me, this is just confirmation that LeBron can still be the best player on a championship team. And not only that, he can really be the best player on the floor against just about anyone. Like I think with the exception of maybe Jokic, that's the one guy who his peak is still higher than LeBron's. But otherwise, LeBron is as good as anyone when he's playing his best right now. And to say that in year 21, about to be age 39, like it's ridiculous.
Yeah, last year I thought was the first year in LeBron's career, outside of maybe his rookie year, where like you're like, okay, he's not in that top tier of superstars. Like he's probably in that tier right beneath that. And like even when he was healthier, but like before the foot injury to start the year, his scoring volume was there and he had his moments, but his jump shot wasn't consistent. He wasn't as impactful defense. It just wasn't as good last year, I thought. And so the obvious kind of response there is like, oh, LeBron's 38. Like he's starting to decline a little bit, that kind of thing. And it's like, no, he just comes back with a vengeance this year. And he's just like literally not just better than last year, but probably better than the year before as well. Like this is the best version of LeBron I've seen since when he won the title in 2020. He's having a career year from 2-point range, a career year from 3-point range. He's been incredible in crunch time. I thought this week was kind of a perfect encapsulation of like, of all the levels you need to hit in order to be like a top tier superstar, which is like Tuesday against the Suns. It's like shootout duel in crunch time against Kevin freaking Durant, and he literally does better and wins. And he was so incredible down the stretch.
And for the third time,
and then it's Thursday, and it's like. and for the third time this season. And then we go to Thursday, and it's like, okay, well, can he like snatch a team's heart from the opening tip? And it's like, yeah, he can still do that. Like he like straight up made everybody on the Pelicans have no belief in their ability to win the game with like early in the second quarter, which was crazy. And then we go to the Saturday game, which I thought was another interesting type of game where it's like, literally Rick Carlisle is just having Aaron Nesmith play a pest all game long, just up underneath him the entire game, fouling the hell out of him, super physical everywhere. And he just does a bunch of little things and impacts the game and leads them along the way. And also a lot of deferring and force feeding Anthony Davis, who kind of had the best advantages in that game. And so to me, that was like all of the little check boxes that you want to see from a top tier superstar. Now, as far as like an accomplishment here, it's really hard to like measure this to other championships simply from the standpoint that it's never happened before. But let's just lay it down as a simple matter of fact. It was a single elimination tournament that every team in the league had an opportunity to qualify for, with a clear cash prize of $500,000 per player, which is a lot of freaking money, right? And a big old trophy at the end of it, right? And 4 of our top contenders were in there. Boston was in there, Milwaukee was in there, and Phoenix was in there, and the Lakers were in there. And the Lakers ended up comfortably winning, and LeBron was the best player in the tournament. He was. So, like, you guys tell me what you think that's worth. It's not worth the championship, that's for sure, but it's not worth nothing either. It's certainly, in my opinion, an impressive accomplishment. And to me, like, in terms of trying to quantify it, really, all it is to me is just the latest in a long line of examples of what makes LeBron a guy who's in the conversation for the greatest basketball player of all time, which is, simply put, he wanted to win the damn thing. And then when he did, he was able to. And that to me is just like an encapsulation of the freak competitor that LeBron is. That's, in my opinion, one of the most under-discussed elements of him in his career, is that he is a freak competitor, because people are so dissuaded by smiles instead of scowls that they can't like understand the difference between the two. But I just, as a LeBron fan, I had a ton of fun watching him this week. It was just like another cool LeBron moment, for lack of a better way of describing it. But before we get out of here, you had mentioned that you had some anecdotes that you wanted to share from your time at on the ground at the tournament. So I wanted to give you the floor to share those stories for us.
Yeah, well, I think along the lines of discussing LeBron and how much he cared about this, how much he gave to win this, and just all the effort that I think kind of goes in behind the scenes, like being in the locker room after they won the championship. It was kind of this, anytime there's a championship situation, it's surreal. And like the T-Mobile Arena is not really designed like a traditional NBA arena. Like typically things are kind of on one side of the arena where you can go back and forth between the locker room or the press room, or everything's within a pretty close walking distance. This was the exact opposite, where you had the media room on one side of the arena, you had the press conference room on the other side of the arena, then you had the Lakers locker room. So it was almost like a triangle of trying to go back and forth. And for me, I'm hobbled, I'm trying to get around, trying to be there for the press conferences. So it was a lot. But once I got to the Lakers locker room, and LeBron had already spoken, he's just sitting there with his shirt off, just in shorts. And he's got ice on his knees, and he's just kind of staring. And you could just tell, like, the guy was exhausted. And he even said it. He was kind of like talking to himself a little bit. And he's just like, man, like, I'm so fucking tired. Like, this was so fucking tiring. And it was just like, he's just sitting, and you're just like, this is arguably the greatest player, second greatest player of all time, who, they invent this new tournament that he didn't have to care about. And, easily they could have lost to Phoenix and had themselves a nice few days off before playing Dallas on Tuesday. And he was like, no, I'm going to go for this. I'm going to give it my all. And like, again, we're talking like trying on defense and doing things that is, sounds simple, but for a guy who has played more minutes than anyone in NBA history, like he really gave it his all in that game and really throughout the tournament. And I thought that was just like, because at that point there's sort of like a security line around LeBron. Like he wasn't doing media. So you could kind of just focus on him. There was no one within a good 5-6 feet of him. and I was just watching him. And then I love the little joke that he threw in. He'll always kind of throw in some subtle like MJ barbs. So when Austin was doing his media for a second time in the locker room, LeBron just yells out, "Who had the better flu game, AR or MJ? It's up for debate." And like you could just tell like he was sitting on something like that. So I thought like overall, he was in pretty positive spirits, but like there was also a business like element to the Lakers where, yeah, they celebrated that there was a champagne room. Like, you're going to do that after you win. They're excited. They won the cup. They got this money. But I thought LeBron and AD at the podium it was very much like Kobe, like job's not finished. And for them, it was just like, yeah, this was nice, but it's early December. We've got another 6 months until where we want to be. Like a lot has to happen for us to get back here in a championship setting. Another thing I thought was quite telling was I don't think people realize how close LeBron and AD actually are. And of course, they're both at Clutch and they've been teammates now for 5 years. But after the podium, they always typically go together post game. They're kind of stepping to the side, and there's some NBA PR people there and some Lakers people there. And so they're kind of waiting for the traffic to clear. And LeBron just leans in and tells him, "I love you, bro. Like, I love you." And he had just been asked the question about what AD has meant to his career of, he's now played with AD longer than Dwayne Wade, longer than Kyrie, longer than Kevin Love, longer than Chris Bosh. This is his longest tenured superstar teammate. And he said, like, it's meant everything. Like, it's been nice to have an alpha male who can take over games and like help me at this point in my career, like not have to do everything and really kind of be my equal. And, I think just that bond that they have and just the way that those two guys mesh, like I think for a duo that's only won one championship, like they have to be in that conversation for greatest duos ever that have only won one championship. Like it's getting to that point now where like they are such a special duo in the way that they complement each other and just give your team, in this case, the Lakers, and a clear physical advantage against basically anybody, where like when LeBron and AD are healthy, they're going to play smash mouth basketball. They're going to live in the paint. They're going to live at the free throw line. And defensively, they're going to be physically imposing and they're going to play a certain style. So to me, I think it was just a culmination of sort of the last 5 years of LeBron and AD, what their relationship means to each other and sort of just them showing each other once again, like when we really lock in, we can win the title in 2020. We can win the end season tournament, and we're going to try and win the 2024 title as well.
Yeah, those guys have been through some battles, man, and a lot of really big moments. It's funny because like LeBron saying he's tired in the locker room is not a surprise to me because, man, is that Pacers team just looks like a royal pain in the ass to play against. Like, oh, good God. It's like you can't even turn your back for a second before like TJ McConnell's coming flying in for a steal. They like the way they run on made baskets. But like the funny thing is dealing with LeBron James and Anthony Davis on the other end is a different kind of pain in the ass for teams to deal with. And I think that's been a big part of their kind of like identity in this era is like probably the most physically imposing 1-2 punch that has been in the NBA in recent history. I think I thought it was really good for the league the way that LeBron went in and popped the champagne and had a little bit of fun because he's like one of a few guys who could do that without looking corny because he's LeBron, because he has 4 Larry O'Briens. And to put it simply, in my opinion, the best case scenario for the league long term is that guys really want to win this tournament every year. Ideally, you'd have, your big playoffs and then you'd have your small playoffs. And every year there'd be these two kind of like, kind of like focal points where everybody kind of coalesces around these as kind of iconic NBA moments. And like, what helps is if the second or first best player of all time runs in there and starts popping bottles and really wants to win the damn thing. And I thought that was really, really cool for the league. So before we get out of here, Jovan, you want to just tell us where we can find some of the stuff you've been working on lately?
Yeah, you can find me on all social platforms at Jovan Buha, Jovan Buha, and you can read my work at The Athletic. Recently just wrote about Anthony Davis's dominant performance. We didn't really get into it, but like one of the games, in my opinion, of his career, possibly his best game as a Laker. I do think, given Indiana's weaknesses in terms of just like once they got Miles Turner in foul trouble, they basically had no one that could protect the rim or provide any deterrence in the paint. Maybe not as impressive as some of the games in the 2020 run, but to me, just AD, like this is peak AD, and sometimes people need to be reminded of it. And I know that we see it, we see the nuances within his game when we watch the Lakers, but a lot of people still, every game, really every quarter is a reassessment of Anthony Davis's legacy, of his standing in the league. And, he's really become kind of the superstar punching bag for a lot of people of just, his best games are held against him for whatever reason of just, why can't you do this every night? And I don't think, there are plenty of stars who have their own inconsistencies or weaknesses or shortcomings that don't get held to that standard of, this is your best game ever, do this every single night. So for me, I wrote about that and just the reminder that AD is a special player, and maybe he's not as consistent offensively as people want. He doesn't have the big 40-20 game every other game, but he still is, when locked in, really as great as anybody. And I don't know who else on planet Earth can do the things that he does defensively and then go out and score 40 points as well. It's a really short list if there's anyone else at all. So wrote about that, and you can check that out on The Athletic.
Yeah, we've wrongfully did not draw enough attention to the 40-20 game from Anthony Davis against the Pacers. It truly was one of the more dominant individual performances, especially given the stakes that we've seen. All right, guys, that is all we have for this part of today. I will see you guys later on this afternoon for our Power Rankings video and a mailbag. You guys heard from Jovan where you can find his stuff. As always, we appreciate you guys, and we'll see you next time.